You are standing in the middle of a city of 80,000 people. There are markets, there are temples, there are children playing in the streets, and in less than one lifetime, every single person here will be gone, and no one will write down why. You might think this is a rare freak event, a one off tragedy buried somewhere in the footnotes of history. It is not. It has happened again and again on almost every continent on Earth, to civilizations far more advanced than you have been led to believe, and the bizarre truth behind why they vanished is nothing like the story you were taught. Think about what you learned in school. A great civilization rises, it gets greedy, or lazy, or unlucky. Barbarians arrive, or a volcano erupts, or the gods get angry in whatever way that era imagined, and everything burns, and the jungle swallows the ruins. It is a clean story, a satisfying story. It is also, in case after case, almost completely wrong. Start with the one that breaks the pattern before the pattern even begins. In southeastern Turkey, there's a site called Göbekli Tepe, massive carved stone pillars, some weighing several tons, arranged in deliberate circles, decorated with foxes, snakes, vultures, scorpions. Here's the part that should make your skin prickle. It is roughly 11,000 years old. That makes it older than writing, older than the wheel, older than pottery, older as far as archaeologists can tell than farming itself. The German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, who led the excavations there for years, argued that this site flips the standard story of civilization on its head. You were taught that humans invented agriculture first, settled down, and only then had the spare time to build temples and monuments. Göbekli Tepe suggests the opposite may be true. Hunter gatherers, people with no cities, no kings, and no crops, came together to build something monumental first. The need to gather, to believe, to build something bigger than themselves may have come before the farms, not after. But that is not even the strange part. The strange part is what they did to it. Göbekli Tepe was not destroyed by invaders. It was not abandoned in a panic. At some point, the people who used it deliberately buried it. They carried in soil and rubble, basket after basket, and entombed their own monument on purpose. Why would anyone spend generations building something extraordinary and then spend years carefully making it disappear? Nobody knows. There's no text. There's no legend. There's only the buried stone, waiting 11,000 years for someone to notice the hill was not a hill. Now hold that question in your mind because it comes back. Move forward in time to one of the largest civilizations of the ancient world and one of the least talked about, the Indus Valley civilization in what is now Pakistan and northwest India. At its height, roughly 4,500 years ago, it may have covered more territory than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. Its great cities, Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, had something almost no other ancient city on earth had: plumbing, covered drains running down the streets, private bathrooms, standardized bricks, so uniform that buildings across hundreds of kilometers used the same proportions, standardized weights for trade. This was not a scattering of villages. This was an organized, engineered urban world. And here is what the Indus cities do not have: no grand palaces, no giant royal tombs, no monuments glorifying a god king crushing his enemies. Archaeologists have spent decades searching for the pharaoh of the Indus, the emperor, the throne room. They have not found one. Some researchers now suspect this civilization may have been run in a way we barely have words for, less like a kingdom, more like a network. Then, over the course of a few centuries, the great cities emptied out, not in fire, not in massacre. The skeletons of a violent apocalypse simply are not there in the numbers the legend would need. The people did not die out. They moved. They dispersed east and south into smaller settlements, and their urban world quietly switched itself off. What could make an entire civilization walk away from its own cities? This is where the evidence stack starts to get uncomfortable, because the answer, in case after case, keeps pointing at the same suspect: climate, not climate as a vague background detail, climate as an assassin. Consider the Akkadian Empire in Mesopotamia, often described as one of the world's first true empires. Around 4,200 years ago, it fell apart. For a long time, historians blamed the usual suspects: politics and invasion. Then the archaeologist Harvey Weiss of Yale University excavated a city called Tel Leilan in Syria and found something stranger than war: a thick layer of windblown dust and sand sitting right on top of the abandoned city, with almost no sign of human activity above it for centuries. The region had not just declined, it had dried out. Earth scientists studying ocean sediments and cave formations from that era found evidence of a severe decades long drought striking a huge band of the planet at roughly the same time, an event now often called the 4.2 kiloyear event. In plain English, the rain simply stopped coming, and it stayed stopped for longer than any government, any king, any granary could survive. So let's visualize exactly what that looks like from the inside, because from the inside, it never looks like the end of a civilization. You are a farmer outside an Acadian city. The first dry year, you tighten your belt. Everyone remembers bad years before. The second dry year, you eat your seed grain, the grain you were supposed to plant. The third year, the canals crack. The tax collectors still come because the empire still needs feeding, and the empire is slow to understand that the mathematics have changed. By the fifth year, your neighbors are leaving, not fleeing, leaving, loading donkeys, walking toward relatives in the hills, toward rivers that still flow. There's no single day when the civilization falls. There's only a morning, maybe 20 years in, when you look down your street and realize no one lives on it but you. Collapse does not arrive like a monster. It arrives like a quiet argument that everyone slowly loses. And before you file this away as an ancient problem for ancient people, understand something. The strangest discovery of all is still ahead, and it will change how you see every ruin in this story, because it turns out the word lost might be the biggest lie in archaeology. First, one more fall, because it is the most famous and the most misunderstood: the Maya. You've heard that the Maya civilization mysteriously vanished, leaving empty pyramids in the jungle. Here's the problem with that sentence. The Maya did not vanish. Millions of Maya people are alive right now, speaking Mayan languages in Mexico and Guatemala and Belize. What actually happened, starting roughly 1100 years ago, is that many of the great southern lowland cities, places like Tikal, were gradually abandoned. And once again, when scientists drilled into lake beds and analyzed cave formations in the region, the chemistry recorded a series of brutal droughts overlapping that exact period. Layer that on top of what archaeology already suggested: intense warfare between rival cities, soaring populations, forests cut down, soils exhausted, and you do not get a mystery, you get a machine with too many failing parts. The kings, whose entire job was to guarantee rain, could not deliver rain. And when a ruler's core promise fails for a generation, people stop believing, then they stop obeying, then they stop staying. And this pattern is not confined to deserts and jungles on the far side of the world. It happened in the heart of North America. Near modern St. Louis, there once stood a city called Cahokia, the largest settlement north of Mexico before European contact. At its peak, roughly 900 years ago, it may have held more people than London did at the same time. Its builders raised enormous earthen mounds, including one, Monk's Mound, with a footprint larger at its base than the Great Pyramid of Giza. Plazas, neighborhoods, a giant circle of wooden posts that archaeologists believe tracked the sun, sometimes nicknamed Woodhenge. And then, over the following centuries, Cahokia emptied. By the time European explorers arrived, the mounds stood silent and the people living in the region had no city there at all. Researchers still argue over the exact mix of causes: flooding, environmental stress, political fracture, but notice what is missing from the list. There's no conquering army. There's no plague ship. One of the greatest cities of its hemisphere dissolved from the inside quietly, and its story survived only in the dirt. Here is the twist, the part that reframes everything you have heard so far. When researchers stopped asking how these civilizations died and started asking where the people went, the story flipped. The Indus people did not disappear. They reorganized into smaller farming communities better suited to the new rains. The Maya did not disappear. Populations shifted north and toward the coasts, where cities kept thriving for centuries. Even in Mesopotamia, the refugees of the drought became the populations of the next era's kingdoms. In other words, the weirdest part is not that these civilizations collapsed. The weirdest part is that, in a brutal sense, collapse worked. Walking away from the cities was not the failure, it was the survival strategy. The pyramids and palaces were abandoned because, when the environment changed, they had quietly become the least important thing the civilization owned. The buildings were never the civilization. The people were. And the people mostly kept going. Which drags Göbekli Tepe back into the light. Those hunter gatherers who buried their own temple, maybe they were not destroying something. Maybe they were finishing something, closing it the way you close a chapter and moving on to whatever came next. We treat abandonment as tragedy. They may have treated it as a decision. There's one more layer to this, and it is the reason this topic exploded in the scientific world over the last decade. We thought we knew how big these lost worlds were. We were embarrassingly wrong. Archaeologists working with a laser scanning technology called LIDAR, which fires laser pulses from aircraft to strip away forest cover in digital maps, began flying it over Central America and Southeast Asia. Around the Cambodian Temple of Angkor, LIDAR surveys revealed vast grids of roads, canals, and neighborhoods hidden under vegetation, part of what many researchers describe as one of the most extensive urban landscapes of the pre industrial world. In Guatemala, LIDAR mapping exposed tens of thousands of previously unknown Maya structures beneath the jungle canopy, forcing scholars to revise Maya population estimates sharply upward. Sit with that. In your lifetime, with lasers, we discovered that some lost civilizations were several times larger than every textbook claimed. The jungle was not hiding a few ruins, it was hiding entire metropolitan areas. So, what does any of this have to do with you sitting in a world of satellites and supermarkets more than you wanted to? Every civilization in this story shared three traits on the day before its decline began. It was the most advanced society its people had ever known. It depended on a complex interlocking system: water, trade, food, authority, that no single person fully understood. And it assumed, without ever saying it out loud, that next year would look like last year. You live in a civilization like that right now. Your food travels farther than an Akkadian merchant traveled in a lifetime. Your water, your power, your money, all of it runs on networks you have never seen and could not repair. That is not a prophecy of doom. The deeper lesson of the Indus, the Maya, the Akkadians, is that people are shockingly good at surviving the end of their world. They adapt, they move, they rebuild somewhere else in some new shape. Civilizations are not buildings. They are agreements, and agreements can be renegotiated. The next time you see a photograph of a ruined temple strangled by tree roots, do not think of it as a gravestone. Think of it as a shed skin. Somewhere beyond the edge of that photograph, the descendants of the people who built it went on, carrying their languages, their seeds, their gods, their stubbornness into the next version of the human story. The ruins are not where civilization died. They are where it stopped needing to be. You're standing in the middle of a city of 80,000 people. Maybe it is your city. The markets are open. The children are playing. And now you know the bizarre truth every vanished civilization learned the hard way. Nothing about this morning is permanent, but the people walking past you are far harder to erase than anything they will ever build.